Since 2001, when the United Nations designated an International Year of Volunteers, public perception of volunteering in China has evolved, especially among young people. In the past decade, millions have volunteered during key national events in China. That's helped to bring increased awareness and attention to social services and the country's development goals. Joining us now to discuss the state of volunteerism in China and what the next generation may bring is Dr. Yawei Liu. He is the director of the China program at the Carter Center and the associate director of the China Research Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also an adjunct professor of political science at Emory University. Welcome to Full Frame, Dr. Liu.
It's great to be here.
Let me take a step back to 2001. What were some of the events that occurred then, and did that really get basically a jump start, the whole volunteerism kick there in China, do you think?
Yeah, obviously that's the year of 9/11, and the United Nations knocked on the door and said, we want to make this year the year of international volunteerism. And the party leader said, great, bring it in. And one of the most famous ladies of China, the Iron Lady, Wu Yi, vice premier, chaired the whole effort. So that put volunteerism on the map in China, so to speak. And all the party and state agencies and department joined the chorus, and the whole country was mobilized to make this a part of a new China, so to speak.
And the UN tracks this sort of thing, and they kind of feel that 2008 was kind of a seminal year for China for two reasons, tragedy and triumph. I mean, this horrendous earthquake that really shook the nation, 70,000 people died, and then the triumph piece of it, the Olympics coming to Beijing. Let's take a look at the earthquake first. What did you see happen when it came to the government and to the people after that tragedy?
Well, obviously, China had a bigger tragedy back in 1976. In 1976, when the earthquake happened, China actually denied all international help. And of course, Chinese people themselves were not able to rush to the zone of disaster. Whereas when the earthquake in Wenchuan happened in 2008, this is the age of the internet, so the news spread wide and far. And many Chinese, they were different from when they were back in 1976. They had more resources at their fingertips, and there are more non-governmental organizations. They all wanted to rush in to help. And of course, because of the lack of coordination, we had more than the government could handle at the time. But quickly the government responded, and there was a much better and more efficient coordination of the volunteers. And I think the government learned a tremendous lesson that the society actually can deliver a lot more to where services are needed.
And so months later in August, you have the Olympics. Did they harness some of that? I mean, did you see a lot of volunteers at that time too?
No, I think the Olympic Games was different, because Olympic Games, you had the assistance and help for the International Olympic Games. The Chinese sent their officials all over the world to the cities where Olympic Games were held. So that was a much more sophisticated process in terms of recruiting. And I think they had more than they really needed. My daughter also wanted to volunteer, and she filed the application online, wanted to go back to China, but she was never able to hear from the committee.
So she missed out on that volunteering opportunity, but a lot of young people took advantage of it, didn't they?
Yeah, I think college students and junior government officials, even high school students, they took the advantage. And according to the UN report, 1.7 million volunteers, and if you calculate their volunteer hours, it could be translated to several hundred million US dollars. So that's a lot the government was able to save.
That is a lot. Let me ask you about young people and what they're eager to volunteer for in China today, do you think?
I think the young people, it depends on which group of young people, whether you're referring to the young people at the high school, where I think they are just way too busy. The study load is way too high for them really to think about seriously volunteering. If you refer to the young people in the universities and colleges, they want to be involved. They want to be involved in social services. They want to be involved in terms of going to the countryside. They particularly want to look at migrants in the cities. where they don't have equal access to education, to healthcare. They were involved in terms of setting up schools for them, setting up legal aid centers for them, and many of them, of course, wanted to even go out of China to African countries and other developing countries to volunteer their services.
So stepping back to 2008, do you think those two critical events were building blocks for where we are now in terms of volunteerism in China?
Not really. I think China, because when I was growing up, there was this famous soldier by the name of Lei Feng. Lei Feng is about volunteerism, and in 1963, Mao Zedong and all the other state leaders called the whole country to learn from him. So I wouldn't say 2008 put the building blocks. It was there. It was dormant because of the reform, because of the introduction of the market economy. So people tended to focus more on taking care of themselves. And so 2008 was a turning point only because these two events, as you mentioned, one very tragic one and the other a victorious, glorious one, that really sort of woke up that dormant spirit and made people think that I probably have more to offer to the country and to the society. You
talked about the government. The government, of course, came out with China's 12th, this 5-year plan in 2011. What were some of the goals elucidated in the plan?
Well, the plan itself, the 12th, which means it started a long time ago. It was really a Soviet legacy of state economic planning every 5 years. What made the 12th 5-year plan different from the previous ones was because this is the first one that declared to the whole nation, the plan is not just about GDP. It's not just about economic growth. It is also about creating a more harmonious society. It is about reduction of poverty. It is about making rural residents and urban dwellers more equitable. And that actually has created more channels for the society force to be involved. And of course, volunteerism is a big part of that societal force.
Can you talk to me about corporate social responsibility initiatives there in China? What are you seeing on that front?
I think corporate social responsibility is something that was introduced in China firstly by international corporations like Microsoft, like Bayer, like Exxon. And they're in China, they're doing business. They understand from their corporate history, in order for the companies to sustain their development, in order for their product to be popular among any country's people, you have to engage the community at large. And the Chinese corporations have learned, and both in China and outside China, the big state enterprises, as well as more private, but also multinationals like Huawei and ZTE, they are now all engaged in corporate social responsibility activities. They're engaging the community. They're involved in education. Involved in art education. They're involved in poverty reduction, and they have done a good job. And I think this is a big part of the internationalization that China is going through.
When you look at corporations, they can mobilize so many people and point them in directions and really make an impact. But we've also seen a dramatic impact through the ages from grassroots, smaller organizations. Are we seeing much of an impact there? Are you seeing that starting to mobilize as well in China?
No, I think they are growing, and according to the UN report, there are multi-million NGOs in China. There are also 4 million, I think they're talking about 20 to 40 million registered, at different levels, and also 4 million NGOs at the grassroots level that were never able to register or chose not to register. So they're all there. The issue here is how do you make them more engaged? How do you monitor them? How do you create standards that all these NGOs will have to apply to their activities and programming? But more importantly, how they're going to be protected, and how they can easily, in a very public and transparent way, to register with the government, and then after the registration, to operate independently.
You're kind of sitting on the sideline. You have a nice view from where you are. If you were to recommend some changes to really enhance volunteerism in China, what might they be?
I think, first of all, you need to have a law for the NGO. How do you register? How are you going to raise your money? How you going to file with the government? You know, it is like here in the U.S. You know, you're going to have a nonprofit, and basically the Internal Revenue Service is the one that monitors activities of the nonprofit. In China, you don't have such a mechanism, and all the government and party departments and agencies are involved. When you have all of them involved, then you don't have anybody involved. And therefore, there is no centralized guidance on this issue. So the National People's Congress will have to be quick in promulgating a law so that there will be both regulation and protection, and then the government can always, you know, sort of on the front, but at the same time, give the NGOs enough room to move around.
Dr. Liu, thanks so much for joining us from Atlanta. It's been great talking to you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
When we come back, how one teen's dream to battle discrimination is finding a global platform.